Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be exploring James Berryhill's theory of time orientation phenotypes. Now, this theory suggests that the way our ancestors lived, whether they were farmers, herders, or hunter-gatherers, that might have influenced how all of us, how we perceive and relate to time even today, like, in the modern world.
Interesting, yeah. So Berryhill's theory, it proposes that these different ways of life, we could also call those subsistence models, that they led to distinct time orientation phenotypes. And these phenotypes are really deeply ingrained, and they may continue to affect our decision-making, our behaviors, and even, sort of like our societal structures.
He really emphasizes that it's not just our genes, right, that determine these phenotypes, but it's also the environment. And he actually uses a diagram to illustrate how both of those factors contribute to observable traits and then ultimately those complex phenotypes that we see.
Yeah, and a good illustration of that is the example of bears adapting to different habitats, right? Despite being the same species, bears in different environments, they develop distinct phenotypes to survive.
Right. So now let's explore the three main time orientations that Berryhill links to those ancestral subsistence models. And those are past, present, and future.
Okay, so starting with farmers, they represent the past-oriented phenotype. Now, farmers relied on the cyclical nature of farming, right? Their dependence on the seasons and on these proven methods, it led them to really value tradition and historical knowledge. They see the past as a source of stability and success, proven success.
And Berryhill even suggests that they may idealize the past as like a golden age, right?
Yeah.
Because it represents that time of proven stability and success. So imagine, right, if you find comfort in routines, or you meticulously organize your photo albums, or if you always choose the classic option on the menu, you might be a farmer at heart, is what he's suggesting.
Right. And then pastoralists, they're linked to the present-oriented phenotype. They lived a nomadic lifestyle and, constantly moving with their herds. They had to be adaptable and respond to immediate challenges. So their focus was on those concrete, observable conditions in the present moment.
So unlike farmers who rely on historical precedents, the pastoralists, they're focused on what's happening right here, right now.
Right.
They're constantly evaluating and adapting to their environment, making decisions based on what they observe.
Exactly. And then finally, we have the hunter-gatherers, and they are associated with the future-oriented phenotype. Their survival depended on anticipating, things like pre-movements and predicting weather patterns and exploring new territories. And so this led them to develop this cognitive framework that embraces change and innovation.
Now, it might seem kind of counterintuitive, right? Hunter-gatherers being future-oriented, but their need to anticipate and plan for those future events, that was really essential for their survival. They had to constantly think ahead, imagining possibilities, anticipating potential outcomes. Their focus was on what could be, not just what is.
Right. It's a different way of thinking about it. And it's crucial to understand that everyone possesses the capacity for all three of these time orientations, right? We simply tend to have a dominant one based on our phenotype, and each orientation, it has its benefits and limitations. Balance is key.
Right. So, for instance, a strong past orientation, that can lead to, the preservation of valuable knowledge, but it also might make it difficult to adapt to new circumstances. Conversely, a present orientation, well, that can make you highly adaptable, but possibly less inclined to plan for the future.
Yeah. And then a future orientation, it can make you innovative, but potentially at the expense of, valuing tradition and the lessons of the past. So understanding these nuances can really provide insights into how these orientations manifest in modern society.
So let's kind of delve deeper into each phenotype, beginning with the farmer. So can you explain how their lifestyle really shaped that past-oriented perspective?
Sure. So farmer societies, they're sedentary, right? They remain in one location year-round. Their social structures are very centralized, often hierarchical, and there's a strong emphasis on authority. And their delayed return subsistence model that requires, long-term planning and a reliance on proven methods, and all of that reinforces their past orientation.
Their whole way of life, it necessitates this really strong connection to the past, right? They're relying on tradition and these established practices to ensure their survival and their success.
Precisely. I mean, they depend on understanding those seasonal cycles, right?
Yeah.
Maintaining soil fertility, over generations, and preserving all of that accumulated knowledge about crop cultivation. And that cyclical view of time, that really reinforces their reliance on the past. They see it as a repository of essential wisdom, a guide for navigating the present and ensuring future success.
And Berryhill points out that their reliance on, this passed down knowledge, It's not just a cultural preference, it's actually a tested survival strategy, right?
Yeah.
Agricultural success, it requires understanding these complex interactions, like between soil and weather and crops and timing. And all of this knowledge accumulated over generations, well, it becomes a crucial resource for managing risk and ensuring continued success.
That's right. And their past-oriented perspective, that also shapes their decision-making. Faced with challenges, farmers instinctively turn to historical precedents and those traditional solutions. And they tend to be more cautious about adopting new practices or technologies because they've learned, that deviating from proven methods, well, that can lead to crop failure and food insecurity.
Their connection to the past also influences their emotional connection to time. They develop these really deep emotional connections to their history and their traditions, and they find meaning and purpose through that connection to ancestral legacy and that responsibility to preserve and transmit cultural heritage.
It's a really profound connection that informs their identity and sense of belonging, but this strong attachment to the past, it can also make it difficult for them to adapt to new circumstances.
So while a past orientation, it offers stability and a sense of continuity, it can also lead to resistance to change, even when change is necessary.
Indeed. It highlights the importance of balance, right? Having that connection to the past is valuable, but so is the ability to adapt and innovate.
Now let's shift our focus to the pastoralists. How does that nomadic lifestyle, always on the move with their herds, how does that contribute to their present-oriented perspective?
So the pastoralist way of life, it's all about adapting to immediate circumstances, right? Constantly on the move. They follow their herds to new grazing lands. They have to respond to these, ever-changing weather patterns. And this really fosters a cognitive framework that prioritizes direct, tangible experiences over, abstract considerations of the past or future.
So their focus is really on the here and now, right?
Yeah.
Dealing with what's right in front of them. It sounds like a very sensory-driven way of life, relying on observation and intuition rather than planning and analysis.
You're right. Their present orientation, it manifests as this intense focus on those immediate sensory experiences. And they develop these, acute observational skills, and they become very attuned to subtle environmental changes that might affect their herds.
It's almost like they're living in this constant state of mindfulness, completely absorbed in the present moment. And that must be essential for survival, in such unpredictable environments.
Yes, this mindfulness is essential. I mean, they need to react quickly to changing conditions. They're making decisions on the fly based on what they're observing in real time. And their decision-making process, it's very different from that of the farmers who, as we talked about, rely on historical precedent. Pastoralists are all about adapting to the moment. They're making practical decisions based on that current situation.
This flexibility and adaptability, that's a key strength, of their present-oriented perspective. Unlike farmers who might resist change, to maintain tradition, pastoralists tend to kind of accept change as this natural part of existence. They see change not as disruption, but as, like, the normal state of affairs. And that makes them very resilient and resourceful, able to adjust their strategies as needed to survive in those unpredictable environments.
Precisely. Their present orientation, it also influences how they learn and transmit knowledge. Unlike farmers who emphasize preserving that historical knowledge, pastoralists focus on transmitting practical skills and developing those acute observational abilities that we were talking about. So their knowledge system, it prioritizes immediate application over historical preservation. It's a very hands-on, experiential approach to learning, focused on developing those skills and instincts needed to thrive in the present moment.
And how does this present orientation affect their emotional relationship with time?
Well, they tend to have less attachment to past events,
Yeah.
right? And reduce anxiety about future uncertainties. So this allows them to really fully engage with the present moment and adapt emotionally to changing circumstances.
They're less likely to dwell on the past or worry about the future, and that allows them to be fully present in the here and now.
Exactly. However, while this present-focused perspective offers many advantages, it also has its limitations.
So what are some of the challenges that might arise from a predominantly present-oriented perspective?
Well, one potential challenge is difficulty with long-term planning, right? Their focus on the immediate moment, it might make it challenging to think strategically about the future or consider the long-term consequences of their actions. They might also be less inclined to learn from past mistakes or historical patterns if their focus is, primarily on dealing with the present. Additionally, their flexible, adaptable nature, well, it might make it difficult to maintain fixed traditions or practices, which can be important for cultural continuity.
So while their present orientation makes them very adaptable and resilient, it can also lead to challenges in areas that require, long-term planning or historical awareness or the preservation of cultural traditions. It's a reminder that balance is crucial. The present moment is important, but so are the past and the future.
Precisely.
Now let's explore the hunter-gatherers and their unique, future-oriented perspective. So how did their lifestyle shape their relationship with time?
Well, hunter-gatherers, they lived in a world that demanded constant anticipation and prediction. Their survival, it depended on being able to track prey, predict those weather patterns, and find those new sources of food and resources. And all of this led to the development of cognitive abilities that were uniquely future-oriented.
It sounds like they had to be incredibly attuned to their environment, constantly looking for patterns and clues that could help them anticipate, what was to come.
Exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
they had to develop these sophisticated mental models of how the natural world worked, right? Understanding the interconnectedness of all these different elements and being able to predict how those elements might interact in the future. And their future orientation, it wasn't about like abstract daydreaming or fantasizing. It was a very practical skill essential for their survival. I mean, think about it. Their survival strategy demanded the ability to, anticipate movement patterns, predict weather changes, and constantly scout for new resources. And all of this, this constant need to project current signs into future outcomes, that shaped a cognitive framework that just naturally extends into the future.
And this ability to think ahead, to imagine possibilities and anticipate potential outcomes, that's what makes them so innovative, isn't it?
Precisely. Unlike farmers who, might rely on those traditional solutions, or pastoralists who are focused on those immediate fixes, hunter-gatherers naturally gravitate toward creating new approaches. Their future orientation allows them to envision these, novel solutions that might not have historical precedent. They see possibilities where others might see only limitations.
So while farmers look to the past and pastoralists focus on the present, hunter-gatherers are constantly looking ahead, imagining what could be and striving to create a better future.
That's a great way to put it. And this future-oriented perspective also influences how they approach risk. While farmers, might see risk as a threat to those established patterns, and pastoralists might evaluate it based on, immediate impact, hunter-gatherers, they view risk through this lens of future potential.
So they're more willing to take risks, to experiment and innovate, because they see uncertainty as an opportunity rather than a threat.
Yes, and this comfort with uncertainty, it's a key strength of their future orientation. It allows them to embrace change and adapt to new circumstances, seeing possibilities for growth and innovation even in, challenging situations.
This sounds like a very entrepreneurial mindset,
Yeah.
always looking for new opportunities, pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
You're right. And their future orientation also influences their social structures and knowledge systems. Hunter-gatherer societies, they tend to be more egalitarian than, those of farmers or pastoralists, with flexible leadership structures that are based on situational expertise rather than, inherited authority.
So their social organization is less hierarchical, more fluid, more adaptable, really reflecting that comfort with change and their focus on individual initiative and innovation.
Exactly. And their knowledge systems, they prioritize the development of, predictive skills, fostering innovation and experimentation, and encouraging the sharing of new discoveries and techniques. They value creativity and problem solving and, that constant pursuit of new knowledge.
It's a very dynamic and forward-thinking approach to knowledge. It's focused on adapting to the future rather than, preserving the past. And how does this future-focused outlook affect their emotional relationship with time?
They tend to be less attached to past events and more focused on future possibilities. And that can give them a sense of optimism and a drive to create a better future.
But as with the other orientations, there are potential challenges associated with a predominantly future orientation. What are some of the downsides that Berryhill points out?
Well, he suggests that a strong future orientation can sometimes lead to an undervaluation of traditional knowledge, right? And maybe a neglect of immediate circumstances. That constant focus on what's next, it might make it difficult to appreciate the present moment or learn from the lessons of the past. They might also be so focused on future possibilities that they overlook practical considerations or fail to address those immediate needs. And their embrace of change and innovation might make it challenging to maintain cultural continuity or preserve, important traditions.
So while a future orientation can be a powerful driver of progress and adaptation, it's important to balance it with an appreciation for the present moment and the wisdom of the past.
Exactly. All three time orientations have their strengths and weaknesses. And a truly balanced approach to life, it requires integrating all three perspectives.
This has been a fascinating exploration of these time orientation phenotypes. We've seen how the farmer, the pastoralist, and the hunter-gatherer ways of life, how those have shaped these distinct ways of perceiving and relating to time, and how those orientations, they continue to influence us even today.
It's fascinating to consider how these time orientations, shaped by our ancestors' ways of life, continue to influence us today. And we can see these tendencies play out in various aspects of modern society. Think about the world of business, for example.
Boy, you can have those entrepreneurs driven by a future-oriented vision, constantly innovating, taking risks to bring their ideas to life. And they embody that hunter-gatherer spirit, of exploration and pushing those boundaries.
Yeah, that's a good point. And then you have like more traditional businesses, perhaps those family-run enterprises that have been operating for generations. And they prioritize stability, proven methods, a deep respect for their history. They're more aligned with, that farmer's past orientation, valuing continuity and established practices.
It's interesting how those different orientations, how they might approach like problem solving or decision making in a business context. A future-oriented entrepreneur, they might be more inclined to embrace new technologies, take risks to disrupt the market.
Right. Whereas a past-oriented business owner, they might be more cautious, maybe preferring to rely on proven methods and those established relationships.
And a present-oriented leader, they might be highly adaptable, responding quickly to changes in the market, prioritizing immediate problem solving over long-term strategic planning.
Exactly. And it's not about saying that one orientation is better than another. It's about recognizing the strengths and limitations of each perspective and understanding how those different orientations can actually complement each other.
Well, it's about finding that balance, isn't it?
Yeah.
We need the visionaries, the innovators, those who are always pushing the boundaries, but we also need those who value tradition, stability, the lessons of the past.
And we need those who are grounded in the present moment, right? Those who are able to adapt to those changing circumstances, respond effectively to immediate challenges.
It makes you wonder, are we instinctively drawn to certain careers or fields based on our, dominant time orientation?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Perhaps those who are drawn to history, research, the preservation of cultural heritage, maybe they have a stronger past orientation.
While those who are attracted to, like those fast-paced, action-oriented fields, like emergency medicine, crisis management, well, maybe they have a more dominant present orientation.
Right. And then those who are drawn to entrepreneurship, technology, those creative fields, they might have a stronger future orientation.
Of course. These are just generalizations, right? There are always exceptions. But it's an intriguing idea to consider. How much of who we are and what we're drawn to is shaped by these deep-seated patterns of thought and behavior that we've inherited from our ancestors?
It's a question that deserves further exploration, for sure. And Berryhill's theory, it provides a really valuable framework for understanding the diversity of human perspectives and approaches to life.
It certainly encourages us to think more deeply about our own relationship with time.
Yeah.
Are we holding on too tightly to the past? Are we too caught up in the present moment? Or are we so focused on the future that we're missing out on what's right in front of us?
These are important questions for each of us to consider. Perhaps by understanding our own, dominant time orientation, we can become more aware of our strengths and limitations and develop a more balanced approach to life.
Berryhill actually ends his article with this very thought-provoking question for his readers. He asks, am I past, present, or future-oriented? And am I a farmer, a pastoralist, or a hunter-gatherer? He suggests that reflecting on these questions can help us understand ourselves better and perhaps even reveal something about our ancestral past.
It's a really fascinating exercise. It's inviting us to consider how these ancient ways of life might still be influencing our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors today.
It's a reminder that we're not just individuals, We're part of this larger human story connected to the past, the present, and the future in ways that we may not even fully realize.
And understanding this connection can help us, appreciate the diversity of human perspectives and approaches to life.
It can also help us develop, greater empathy for those who see the world differently than we do.
Exactly, because ultimately we're all in this together, We're navigating the complexities of time and striving to create a better future for ourselves and for generations to come.